welcome to another episode of Prepper Talk Radio. Guys, this is our weekly live. If you're not already in these every Wednesday, we're streaming on our Facebook. We're streaming in our private Facebook group. We're also streaming on our YouTube. Check us out, and eventually we're gonna hook up our Instagram. So if you're an Instagrammer, we'll be streaming there too. But make sure you guys get involved, participate. I see some of you guys already in the chat. Thank you for being part of Prepper Talk Radio. And as a reminder, we've got a sweet deal with our friends over at Survival Frog. Go to survivalfrog.com. You can save 10% at checkout. Use our coupon, Prepper Talk. And you can actually use that same coupon code on so many other websites. It's amazing. If it's prepping, we probably have a coupon code there for you. If we don't, let us know and we can get you one set up. So tonight we're going to be talking about impractical prepping.
and you know, maybe to kick this off, I want to acknowledge that in the present, most prepping is impractical. Most of the things we do, well, maybe that's generalizing a little too much. Many of the things that we do, to most people that aren't preppers, who maybe not on the same page as we are, it's impractical, right?
I'm going to argue against that because for the everyday Tom, Dick, and Harry, whatever, they might see it that way. You might, I don't know, maybe you're going crazy. I don't know. Are you feeling okay? Like, but here's the thing. Nothing about prepping, standard prepping, like self-reliance, is impractical. But maybe you don't need to spend $115,000 on that 6x6 Jeep Gladiator that's for sale right around the corner from my house, right?
That truly is impractical.
That has bulletproof armor on the side doors. Like, there's some impractical things that you can do.
Well, practical and impractical, I think, based on what Shane's talking about, is kind of the mood of society at any given time. And you're talking about stuff, Scott, that's absolutely like common sense, really self-reliant common sense. Shane's talking about stuff like what the world is doing right now, like the actual reality of the world right now. We look like a bunch of woohoo, Yahoo, jobs.
Well, even just thinking about my bug out location, right? What am I doing with it right now, other than spending weekends there and taking the family there? Is it great? I love it to death. I wouldn't have it any other way. Is it impractical? Yeah, right now. In another year, in another month, it probably won't be impractical. So that's kind of where I'm going with this, right? It's extra expense. I got to pay extra water bills and power bills and taxes and all that, and it's impractical, right?
Are you going into debt for it?
No, there's no debt to it.
Does it bring you happiness?
Absolutely.
Does it bring you peace?
But does that mean it's not impractical?
Does it bring you peace?
Yes.
Then
I want to be there right now. If I wasn't doing this, I'd be there right now.
Stop your belly aching. That's not impractical.
All right. Okay. All right.
Impractical.
Now we know your definition of.
I'm calling up Atlas Bunkers.
There we go.
And getting a 30-year home mortgage.
Yeah.
Whatever. I don't know.
No. Yeah. Absolutely right. To put a bunker in the ground that you'll go down there just to check it out, just to make sure the place is clean. And
here's the thing about
never use it.
This is the thing that pisses me off the most about the bunkers, right? People look at bunkers like, oh man, that'd be so cool to get. They are set up for you to live in there 14 to 21 days.
That's it?
That's it. They're tiny. They are tiny. It's an infinitesimal survival window with a giant price tag.
Unless you're
let's go spend $200,000 on a larger bunker that we can stay there for 40 days. What? It's just impractical. For 99.99999% repeating, like, it doesn't make any sense.
Except for that one event when it will matter the most, right? So there's always an argument.
That event.
Yeah. Like there's always an argument against anything that would be considered practical, or maybe not call it an argument, call it justification, right? Are you justifying it? So that, I guess that could be something that would qualify as impractical or practical. Are you justifying, or do you have, and maybe just reasons or justifications as well? So,
Are you using irrational justification or
Mm.
wild justification? Like, because you could justify anything if you really want to get down to it.
well, yeah, there's a law, a way to go about judging laws. It's called the practical man. I think that's what it's called. What, not the practical, what would the
Prudent.
average or the prudent man?
It's
Yeah,
called the prudent person law.
prudent person. Yeah, theory, whatever. What would the prudent person do in this situation? Would they build a bunker? No, probably not.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Practical Civilian says here, yeah, I haven't been able to read all these messages. I've been chatting too much. But yeah, one never knows when a Maui event would happen to the rest of us. Absolutely. And so what I'm doing is, for me, is absolutely practical. It's but you know, at times of like, okay, I just wrote a big insurance and taxes check at the end of the year. And I, okay, what benefits am I getting from this at this very moment? Kind of impractical what I'm doing right now. So,
well, but like, then you got to look at things like, I almost fell into this. I almost did this. I almost bought a big military surplus diesel deuce and a half about 5 years ago, and financially it would have been fine back then. But now it would have been like, why would I have that? Because where would I put it? What would I need to like? You have to plan like ahead, like, okay, what's really feasible? And like these huge overlanders, you know, Practical Civilian pointed it out earlier. He's like, there's so many huge overlanders. Like people get into it, and they're like, I just dropped $180,000 on a Unimog with a camper attached to the top,
or even a Tacoma with all the gear and a rooftop tent and everything. They're dropping tens of thousands of dollars on vehicle modifications that they'll use a couple times a year. Is that impractical?
What do you call a Tacoma with a hard shell camper on the top?
I don't know. Is this a joke?
Yeah, it's a hard taco.
Oh, okay. Hard shell taco.
What do you call a Tacoma with one of those blow up covers on the back of their
a soft taco?
Yeah, it's a soft taco.
That's awesome, dude.
What do you call it when they have all the gadgets attached to the side and the top and the outside? You got the shell and you've got everything for overlanding.
Tell me.
Taco Supreme.
Yeah, there you go. Taco Supreme. I like it.
It's cool, but it's not practical. It's like most of the guys that I've met that actually have those rigs don't even go off road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really don't. I mean, not to the extent that the vehicle is capable, you know.
Right.
You know, like Mike was saying here, so you know, you can say the same about your self-defense advice. I totally agree. You're absolutely right. You know, it's not about the possibilities, it's about the consequences, right? What are the consequences of not carrying every day with a round in the chamber, like we were talking about in our last conversation, that you'll have to listen to. Yeah, it's about the consequences, not about the chances.
Well, and it's like relying on systems that break for security, right? For food supplies, right? Supply chains and all those things, relying on those things. We have now learned, thank you 2020, 21 and 22. If you haven't paid attention, I'm sorry, you're probably a lost cause. But if you have paid attention, you've seen all the impracticalities of the way we live, the way we've been taught to live our lives with this whole commercial driven mindset, right? Oh, I've got to buy this and I got to buy that and I got to have this streaming and I've got to have that system. I've got to pay for these things. I've got to have 2 gym memberships and all the wackadoo things that we think is normal everyday life, that we're just overextending ourselves, our time, our energies, our attention, right? So many things we're just like don't need to be doing. And what makes the most sense are the things like gardening, canning, living sustainably, right? They joke about, I joke about living sustainably. Everyone's like, oh yeah, that means you got to have solar and you got to have wind turbines. You got to have, no, it means you got to be throwing away a lot less stuff. It means you buy a pair of boots and that pair of boots lasts you 3 to 5 years. Right. It means reducing and reusing. And and living by the creed of like, use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. Thank you, depression, for teaching us that lesson. And a lot of people are going to start learning that lesson again really soon, because they're impractical about the way they're living. Like, cancel the subscriptions, cancel the crazy stuff. Like, if you're spending hundreds of dollars per kid on Christmas next week, and you're not prepped, and you don't have a 90-day home store or 90-day pantry, like, your priorities are wrong. You're impractical living. And that's what scares the crap out of me.
What Practical is saying here is, absolutely true. We if we take into consideration what our government's doing, what's happening in general out in the wild, what we are doing is not impractical at all. If you really see the big picture, none of this is impractical. And then what was the other?
Well, the good solid. What the wise temperate prepper is somebody who's playing the long game. I know exactly what some of these comments are. I see the trucks on the side of the road, and I think to myself, that dude is just a pretty boy looking to have a big fat truck, and it's all ego based. It's pride. Like,
yep,
look at my cool truck with my fat tires. I got 75-inch rims. I'm like, yeah, bro, but if crap hit the fan, would you even know what to do with it? Like, you'd probably be the first guy going, "Oh, mommy, where are you?"
Does it even still run?
Mommy, where are you?
Will it even still run?
Well, and the truth of it is, when you modify a vehicle, and maybe we're going off the rails here, that heavily, you're making a week and incapable of going off road and more likely to break down and such. But Mike had a great comment here I wanted to comment on. It's I think it is impractical to have a year's supply of freeze-dried food for your entire family. We've talked about this before. 90-day pantry of your everyday stuff. I have another 3 months of freeze-dried, and then another 6 months of bulk stuff. I think for most people that's impractical, and I don't think I'd want that anyway for my family. A year's worth of freeze-dried stuff. You'd go nuts. You couldn't eat it. You'd go, what's the taste blind?
Well, here's the reality of
you don't have enough water.
Like, I have a year supply, and I don't think it's impractical that I bought it. And the reason why is because I have everything else already. And I look at my freeze dried as, here's a solution. I can toss bags at people that are like, "Oh, I need food." Fling, get off my porch. Right. But it's also, I almost said so much stuff, and I shouldn't. I don't have anything, guys. I really don't prep. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I have wheat, I have rice, I have beans, I have barley, I have oats, I have all this stuff, right? I have all the raw ingredients, and none of that's freeze-dried. And I have spices, and I have all these things that we cook with. And I have all this canned food, and I have all, but it all goes into FIFO, first in, first out. And when I buy something, it goes to the back of the stack. And when I use something, I pull from the front of the stack. And my freeze dried is to supplement throughout. Like, oh, you know what? I really don't want to eat any of that stuff. Oh, let's just eat some of these meals. Boom, toss them in the water, reconstitute them. Cool. And it's good. But if you live off freeze dried alone, oh, you're going to hate life.
Yeah, exactly what I was saying.
That's the thing. That's the most impractical part about it is like, if you're buying all these freeze dried and dehydrated foods from all these guys that are like packaging it and selling it to you, and you think this is the solution. Like, the reality is you're going to get constipated, or you're going to have dietary changes that are so severe that your body's going to get so ticked at you that you're going to get sick.
Yeah, and like Practical says here, if you're freeze drying your own, I think that's a completely different story. Making your meals that you love to eat, that you're going to eat, that you eat all the time. Absolutely.
Go back when it comes to freeze dry. Go back to individual ingredient and individual components, not full meals, unless the full meal is Mountain House.
I mean, not to get into definitions, but practical is something that just really off the top of my head, it just means something that makes sense. It's reasonable. It makes sense. It's common sense, which is not that common anymore after all. But something that's practical is just, hey, this makes sense. It's reasonable, and let's go. Yeah. Impractical is like, why are you doing that? Like, what in the heck is that going to serve? How's that going to serve you?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things about Impractical Things is like, why do you have like 17 outfits that are pure camo? Like, what are you doing? Like, what's up? Are you going to be
I
a
like
gray man?
camo, you know
Or are
what
you
I
going to be
gotta
like
say?
the obvious man? Like, I'm the
Well, it
obvious
depends on where you
man.
live too.
Captain
Like
Obvious.
if you live in a forest that's mossy oaks, then get your mossy oak camo and have at it. Like
Yeah, I guess so. I mean,
if you're playing hide and seek all the time with everybody in your neighborhood and that's where you live, like good for you.
The other thing is practical is like you got to live in today's society at some level. I mean, I guess you can be a hermit. You can go out into the woods and just like get off grid right now. But I feel like if you go off grid right now, you're leaving early. Like and there's a lot of people that went, so to speak. Oh, they got inspired to get off grid, and to go build this encampment. And before you know it, CPS is out there taking their kids away. Before you know it, the law enforcement's out there like, hey, you can't have this out and then the other, because electricity can't go out there, water's not going out, like all these different rules that are still, unfortunately, illegal, but they're not lawful, but they're still enforcing these things. So if you're going off grid, you're putting yourself back on the radar by doing those extreme, crazy things. And so that's part of being a gray man is sure, like build something off, but don't be so obvious about it that you're causing attention or you're drawing attention to yourself so that you've got, legal administrators and city, people coming at you like, hey, why are you doing this in the city, whatever. You got to be practical. Don't be
Well, I
a
think that's
wild
where
man.
I kind of disagree with you a little bit, Paris, because you can do all that and go off grid and homeschool your kids, and it's how you show it that could be the problem, right?
That's fair.
It's how you interact with society that can be the problem. If you're like telling everybody they're crazy and that they're overreaching and if you're running up against the wall all the time, the wall is hard.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The wall is the system that they've put in place to stop us from doing those things. But like you can go off grid, right? You can live fully homesteading somewhere and homeschool your kids. And are there certain parts of life that you still connect with? Yeah, of course. But you don't like, and if you go 100% silent, man, nobody will ever find you again.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what you want. And I'm the last guy that's going to go against what you felt prompted to do, because I've done some stuff that I'm like, that sounds crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a prompting I was told to do. And I'm like, I look at it in hindsight and I go, holy cow. Thank you, God.
Mm-hmm.
But if you aren't getting inspiration to do something and you go do it and it's a little bit crazy and you're pushing against the wall and there are consequences that come, then it's like, dude,
and you got to be able to,
it's impractical.
You got to also be able to like check your inspiration against, actual things that are real. Like you can't be, well, I got inspired to, there's some wackadoos out there recently in the news in the last year or so. They got inspired to kill their kids. Like that's not an inspiration from the right guy. Like you got to find that's an inspiration, but that's definitely from the bad guy. And so that's what I'm saying is like, don't do crazy stuff like that that's not been checked against the scriptures or, somebody, run your idea. Yeah. Have a couple people you trust. I think that Practical said it too. Is like never tell anyone outside of your immediate family and those that you and that doesn't necessarily mean blood. Sometimes family can be people that you've chosen, and just be very careful. And then check it with them. Like, hey, is this crazy? Does this sound right? Does this sound like what something that's reasonable? I mean, I've called you, Scott, several times, and you've called me. Hey, I got this thought, feeling, impression. What do you think? How's that, work towards this, work in the scriptures or whatever. And we're like, have a little conversation. And before you know it, we're both edified and we both found out and realized something better than what we'd even thought of bringing to the conversation in the first place. So there's some real good value in having good people like that you can check your ideas against and make 100%. Sure that you're not going wackadoo.
So yeah, what is an impractical amount of freedom seeds? Is there a number that's impractical? I guess it depends on what you expect, right?
Anything over 0 for calibers you don't have is impractical.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm stockpiling, I don't know, 30-aught, and I don't have a 30-aught, what am I doing?
That's impractical.
That's impractical. If I'm stockpiling 227, like, what am I doing? Like, I have 3,000 rounds of 22. That's not enough.
Yeah.
I need another 22 and I need another 30,000 rounds because that's just a fun little contraption. with
Very
freedom
useful
keys.
caliber. So on those same lines, I'm going to stir the pot a little bit here. You guys let me know what you think.
Okay.
A sniper rifle is impractical. A sniper, you set your rifle up as a sniper rifle. You purchase the rifle and the optics and everything as a sniper rifle. That is impractical. Am I wrong? Am I right?
In most cases, for most people, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's because they lack training.
Well, then your intention
They
is,
have
as a
not
sniper
taken
rifle, your
initiative
intention
to
is to kill
go-
somebody.
And that's kind of what I was getting to is, are we in that situation yet? No. Will we get there? Probably. So
Well, I look at it.
Is
this
it
way.
good for some people out there to have that sniper setup and it practical for them? Yes. For me, I don't feel it's practical. Part of that inspiration you're talking about. I have not set myself up with a sniper, using air quotes, sniper rifle. I don't feel I have the need for it. There is a question of shooting someone out that distance. You know, that's not a defensive shot unless you're in wartime, right? Then you
I'll
can call it
disagree.
defensive,
It can be
right?
defensive.
And exactly at that point, it can be defensive. But okay, practical civilian. Want to hear more? Absolutely not.
But
Sniper, yeah.
I think for most people, it's impractical, right? But
Mhm.
for example, I have a cousin who's super into it. He's a long range shooter. That's his
Mhm.
hobby, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's his
Not
hobby.
impractical for them. Yeah.
And he's got the disposable income to be able to go do it. Like I've got a few rifles that have longer range scopes, but they're not sniper setups, but they're not limited at 100 yards, right? And so I think it's not impractical in a lot of cases, but I also think there's some cases where it is impractical.
Mhm.
If you don't know how to shoot a handgun and you've got a sniper setup, what?
Yeah.
That's where I'm like, that's impractical.
Mhm.
Yeah, where you could argue, like Mike's saying here, a shotgun is much more practical because it tends to be able to do more things. You can do more with it, right? Whereas
then you have to have the right ammo.
you have to have the right ammo, maybe
Yep.
the right length of barrel, the right shotgun. It depends on what you want to do with it, right? Red
It is-
Rider. Yeah, Red Rider season.
Justin, that's awesome, dude. With Christmas in
Just keep
right
your
around
eye
the
out,
corner,
Justin.
it is Red Rider season.
It's
Yep.
a good thing. It's a good thing you know a medic that can help fix that situation. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But yeah,
That's awesome.
there's a lot of things that are impractical. Like
Most of it is all the
there's people in
ego-driven
my inner
stuff.
circle. It's the ego-driven, the flashy stuff, right? The thing about prepping is it's supposed to not be flashy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I've got a few friends that are like, look at all the stuff we're doing right now. We're totally prepping for the apocalypse. We're putting solar panels on everything. We're like, and they become a target because everything is visible to their neighbors. It's impractical.
Along those same lines as as the sniper rifle, what about say night vision or body armor? Is that impractical? One could argue right now, do I have a need for body armor or night vision? No. But will I in the future? Possibly. I hope to be out of here and not have the need for that. I do have body armor, by the way. So have I ever done anything with it? No, other than maybe a little bit of training wearing it, right? But
when you see Shane, when you see the writing on the wall,
impractical.
When you see the writing on the wall, though, bro, like
yeah,
all the different things that are happening with the different CBDCs, with the different controls that they're putting in place for electric vehicles, with all the stuff that they're trying to do with different, they're poking the bear for civil unrest. I mean, they've got a movie coming out called Civil War. This is all predictive programming stuff that's coming out, and it's like, yeah, we need to be paying attention. And so, I believe that it's becoming more and more practical to get geared up, to get to the point where you're like, you know what, I can defend myself. And I think that also has a lot to do with the area that you live in. I know that certain major metropolitan cities, I mean, for sure, if you're in Chicago, dude, like you got to have body armor just to go to work. You know what I mean? In Chicago. But if you're in rural, Kansas or someplace, maybe, you know, driving a tractor, you know, and you're just still pretty safe. You know, that's going to be some of the determining factors as far as I'm concerned.
I think that area between rural and suburban is probably going to be one of the more dangerous areas. And you might be looking at me going, that's insane. Let me explain why. Because there's so many people that are like, well, I've got a hunting rifle. I'm just going to go hunting. And there's going to be so many people that are trying to hunt on that fringe,
in their
in that area, that body armor is going to be absolutely practical because everyone's going to be shooting at everything that's moving.
Plus, you can get a setup for a couple $100, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, you're getting the heavy plates, heavy 500, what do you call it? The
500 AR?
The AR 500 steel. So, and it's very inexpensive compared to what it used to be. But if you're going for the soft body armor, okay, that's probably a little more impractical because it's can be a lot more expensive.
But I honestly was about to go this direction, but I like what Practical Civilian said. It's better to learn, train unconventional and guerrilla warfare tactics and methods, right? I think there's a lot to be said for understanding how to booby trap your property, right? There are certain things, in most cases, all of it is illegal. But in a SHTF scenario, dude, the gloves are off, guys. You've got to remember that when things go sideways and there is no one to enforce any rule of law, you have to be prepared to defend yourself in every way, shape, and form.
I would say enforce policy versus rule of law, because rule of law is...
Well, no, because rule of law, here's the law, right? The Supreme Court ruled on this, and they agreed that the rule of law of the land is what? The 10 Commandments in the scriptures. They've actually declared that. That is law. Everything else...
They certainly don't act like it, seems like.
Well, they don't. It's because everything else is ordinances and policies.
Yeah.
That's the sad state of affairs of where we live in society, in the world today, is they don't focus on the law. There has to, if a crime is committed, someone has to have been a victim. Someone either has to be injured or property damaged or destroyed or taken away. Otherwise, it's not a crime. And they're like, oh, you committed a crime. What crime did I commit? Well, you were speeding. Who was hurt?
Yeah.
Right. They're enforcing policies. It's basically the same as having an HOA, and your HOA president's running around getting mad at everybody.
The Karens.
That's the problem with the lawmakers of today.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, Mike's saying here, what about a drone?
Which drone?
I think it depends on, again, what your needs are. I have a drone. I didn't buy it. It was a work gift. But I can see a lot of practical uses for defensive situations having a drone, especially if you're in a remote area, you want to cover some distance.
Like a GoPro setup type drone?
Yeah, that's what I assume. That's what I assume.
Combat aerial vehicle. Because an unmanned
combat aerial vehicle, I like that.
Impractical.
UAVs, right? Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that's an option at all for any of us. So I'm assuming Mike is saying just a typical.
I'm going to throw my drone up to patrol my perimeter.
There are national parks. There's a guy that's been helping with the national parks, and he's training eagles and other raptors on how to take down drones. Have you seen that?
I have. Yeah, that's crazy,
dude. I'm getting an attack eagle. Actually, my wife just showed me a video yesterday. This guy was out on the lake and he sees this eagle far in the distance, and he's like, "Wow, that is awesome." And he's like, "God, I know all the things you create are awesome." And he's like, I would really love to see an eagle up close. Just show me that you're here. Show me that you hear me. And just give me a chance to see that eagle closer." And he pans his camera to his shoulder. The eagle came and landed on his shoulder and is just hanging out with him. Have you guys seen that video?
No.
Just happened. It's amazing. So be careful what you pray for, because God is listening. And even if it's impractical, he'll answer that prayer in ways you probably aren't expecting.
That's awesome.
That's so cool. That's actually really cool.
I've wanted that since I was a kid.
An eagle to land on your shoulder?
Well, not just eagle, birds in particular. And I've had a few experiences like that where a robin has been sitting on the fence. I walked over to it, picked him up, and said hi to the robin, and they flew off.
That is so cool.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, another subject, but yeah, I love that. That's awesome.
It's funny because, like, okay, speaking of animals, Impractical Preps, right? just go crazy and have all the hunting gear and everything and not know how to hunt or have a place where you can hunt in an SHTF scenario. Everything's going to be gone in the city limits, outside the city limits for miles and miles and miles post SHTF because everyone's going to go out hunting. And that first rifle, everything's going to be gone.
Hmm.
So it's very practical for everyone to learn archery, which I know you love archery, Paris. You're doing all kinds of fun stuff with archery.
Yeah, I did. I bought a gun, I bought a bow, and unfortunately I put an arrow through my neighbor's fence and kind of slowed down on my training. But I just got invited by a buddy of mine who's a bow hunter and to go and start doing some more training. And in fact, he invited me on Sunday to go out with him this week or in the near future to start practicing again. And I agree. I have a crossbow as well. I think those are great tools. And one of the things, I mean, I know that it's not necessarily part of the topic, but just to kind of piggyback on what you're talking about, Scott, is if people don't have food storage, they're going to go hunting. They're going to think they can go scavenge. They can go find stuff. And so you're going to need to protect yourself against those scavengers. But there's going to be a period of time, probably a month, maybe, where if you can bunker and hole up, that's going to be more practical than going out and trying to get food, because you're gonna be competing with too many people. I hate to say this, but let the people that kind of didn't really plan properly die off while you're bunkered in, and then go out and start doing anything if you need to. And that's where I feel like that 90-day supply of food and water is going to save your butt, because most people who didn't plan for that are not going to live that long. And you're going to see a lot less population after 90 days, when you go out to get to replenish your resources.
Well, let's make sure we do a bit of a clarification here, because I believe that shooting a bow within city limits is just about as against the law as shooting a gun within city limits.
Depends on the city, I'm sure, but
I'm sure it depends on the city. But just a quick disclaimer to all our listeners: don't do what we do. Don't listen to us.
Yeah, don't do what Paris did and shoot your neighbor's fence.
As long as it didn't go through the fence.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, never mind. I'm not.
We actually got a question from MG. Just popped in. A question about tourniquet use. Go ahead and drop your question. If we can answer it, we will. We've also got Justin, who is an emergency medical technician. If he's still in the chat, he might be able to answer that question as well.
I might be able
to. Another impractical thing, and this is something I did, but I did it because I felt inspired to. I bought an entire surgical set. I've gone out. I've spent thousands of dollars on first aid. Now, does that sound impractical? 100% yes, because I am not trained to use any of that stuff. But I was prompted to buy it, so I bought it. And here's the thing. I know I said emergical. Sorry, Justin. my brain.
It's a new word.
Wires crossed.
No, it's a new word.
It's an emergical.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a shirt. Emergical.
A medical emergency. An emergical.
Emergical. But
I understood. I know what you're saying.
My neighbor across the street is a emergency room nurse. And 1, 2, 3, 7 or 8 houses up, I have an ER doc. And around the corner from him, I have a brain surgeon, and there's a couple other surgeons right around for me. And I've asked them all what kind of first aid kits they have, what kind of first aid things they have. And they have basically the Johnson & Johnson tiny box garbage.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, I'll just go to the hospital if something happens. I'm like, what if the hospital's gone? What if you can't get to the hospital?
Why would it be gone? That's impractical.
So I bought stuff because I knew they didn't have it. And the funniest was when I lived in my prior house to this one, went on a scout camp with our church and all the scouts in our church. So it was 6 different troops. And we got down there and we had a couple of doctors. We had 10 scoutmasters and assistants. And I was the only one with real first aid kits, including tourniquets and everything else. Everybody else had the little Johnson & Johnson garbage stuff. That is one of the areas where it might be impractical to go big, but it's better to go a little big than to not be able to get home. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Justin is.
So yeah,
Is he going to
Justin.
kidnap me? What's going on? What's going on?
No,
No. He just said the first person I'm kidnapping after SHTF is a dentist. I think that's a really good idea. I know, Shane, you bought a dental kit, didn't you?
Yeah, very impractical use right now. I never want to use it. I'm telling you, it has the most terrifying instruments in there that you could possibly imagine.
I bet.
It's like a torture kit or something. It's horrible.
Before you get another dental kit, go get some natural holistic dental solutions. There have been some amazing studies on oil pulling with your teeth. And I actually follow a lady that actually is putting out a book in a couple months on this. But you can do more with oil pulling than they can clean at the dentist's. And you can actually reverse cavities and regrow enamel.
Nice.
It's phenomenal.
Remineralize your teeth.
Mm-hmm.
That's
and those are the things. That's where we need to be moving. Like, that's the practical solutions. It's impractical, honestly, to be paying all this health insurance and dental insurance and all this insurance that isn't fixing anything. They're just treating it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Learn how to fix things.
It's like you almost wonder, have our teeth gotten better since they invented toothpaste, since toothbrushing? I don't know. Like, what did they do anciently for their teeth? Like,
exactly.
It's like, what do the Native Americans do when they're, do they have teeth problems? First,
we've been fed so much BS over the years, and a lot of it's just the sugar in everything. But I can address MG's question real quick. I'm not an expert. I'm a former EMT.
Emergency medical technician.
Yeah, knowing a little bit about current techniques for tourniquets is that tourniquets used to be kind of a last resort, but now it's thought that they should be more of a first resort, because you don't want to, from what I understand, MG, you do not want to loosen that tourniquet once it's on there. You place it to stop the bleeding. You leave it on there until they get to an emergency room or competent people, and it does not make good advice to release tourniquet to see if it stopped bleeding, or just leave it on. And there is more success saving limbs using a tourniquet than previously thought, if I'm saying that right, Scott. Our good friend Jeff Kirkham, who owns Rat's Tourniquets, he's kind of filled us in on this, and he's obviously knows what he's talking about. So I'd go over to Rat's Tourniquets, and that's what we prefer. I mean, that's the tourniquet I prefer. But you should use it more often than not, or than previously thought. I'll say that.
Oh, yeah, here we go. Okay, so I just started doing oil pulling, so this is awesome. Practical Civilian, he does oil pulling all the time with olive oil and coconut oil. I just started using coconut oil, so this is exactly what I'm talking about. There's so many things you can do naturally that truly fix things, like help your body actually fix itself. That is absolutely practical in every application. Learn how to do these types of things. Now, going back to suturing, we've got a good friend over at AMP3. He is an emergency room trained ER doctor, and he does teach suturing, which is great. But I've bought like 20 different staple gun system kits, not for your house, but for your body. It's way more practical than trying to do your own suturing, because you just clean it up and just. Is that a
special kind of stapler
way of doing things with less? What's that?
Is that a special kind of stapler? You don't want to just grab the stapler out from the office and go for it. You want to have a special kind of stapler for that.
No, it's a medical device, and you can buy them all over the place.
Don't go in your office and grab your stapler and go for it. I mean,
well, and staples and sutures are not really part of emergency medicine, right?
Right.
You don't need to be trying to suture or even staple in that emergency situation. You apply direct pressure and get the person where they need to get to for better care, right? And if it's an SHTF situation, yeah, maybe that's your house, that's your place, or someone designated as a medical lead who knows how to do that kind of stuff. So
Well, there's also wound closure devices that work fantastically. Like there's Senvoc, there's butterfly bands, there's like all these really cool, simple to use things that you don't have to get super technical. Like if it's medium sized gash and things like that, you can take care of that yourself, right? But absolutely stock up on antibiotics, because otherwise an infection is what's going to kill you, right? You may stop the bleeding and suture things up, but you've got, thank you, Justin. Which goes to one of our favorite sponsors that we talk about all the time, Jace Medical. I'll put it across the bottom of the screen. Use the code PrepperTalk to save $10 on your emergency antibiotics. You can also get your daily medications through them, but go to Jace Medical, JASE medical.com. That stuff, you're gonna make sure you want that before things go sideways.
Yeah, and
Because
even
holy crap.
topical antibiotics are good too. Like having neosporins and just a stash of that kind of stuff too is going to be good. Or the antibiotic ointments and stuff like that.
yeah, I think what you said earlier, I think it was you, Scott, maybe it's you, Paris. It is impractical to be relying on our medical system, our any current systems, our government, any of that stuff. That's what's really impractical. And the more practical solution is to be self-reliant. It may take a change of mindset to believe that. Whereas it's so easy to jump in the car, go down to the ER, right? Especially when you're in a panic mode. But the more wisdom you have, the more skills and supplies you have. An emergency for most people may not be an emergency for you at all, and that's pretty darn practical, if you ask me.
Oh yeah, it goes back to switch your mindset, adjust your mindset, and then increase your skill set.
Yep.
There's so many things that I've learned in the last decade that I didn't know anything about before, right? It's the example of going to college. You go to college, you learn a whole bunch of things. Then you go get a job and you learn most of that didn't really matter. What mattered is, can I solve problems?
Yep.
And college, the most important thing I learned in college was confidence that, yeah, I can solve problems.
Yep.
And as a prepper, I've learned better how to solve problems, how to think creatively, also think critically to get myself out of my own personal SHTFs.
Well, I mean, just thinking along those lines, it's more practical to be self-reliant than to be dependent upon and anything. Like, you don't be dependent upon. I mean, you have to interdependence is important. You got to work with other people. You got to know how to play nice with others, but don't be dependent upon other people for anything that you could do yourself, and really learn how to do some things. Like I have to follow my own advice here. There's mechanical things that I don't know how to do. And so I really do depend upon my mechanics for my car to help me understand what's going on. So there's not everything in our lives can we do all ourselves, but we can do as much, but work toward it. Like, increase your skills, learn where you're, play to your strengths, recognize your weaknesses, and then fill in the gaps on those with really good, trusted friends, and that have a strength in an area where you're weak. And then you hopefully have a strength in an area where they're weak, and you're complementing each other. And rather than, that's what it is about. And it's impractical to compete with one another, but it's totally practical to complement one another. And that's what I would say is working together to find those relationships where you can do that, and just stop being dependent upon the system, upon whether that's medical, any kind of system that's outside of you. Work towards self-reliance. That's the most practical way to live, and of course, be a prepper.
Yeah.
Well, it goes back. Do you guys remember that movie, A Beautiful Mind, with Russell Crowe?
Yeah, it's been a while, but yeah.
So it goes over the life of the mathematician John Nash, who was a Nobel laureate. He won because of his economic model. Economic model. And basically the whole idea behind his economic model was that everyone should go after their own interests in harmony with each other.
Yeah.
and that if you go after your interests in harmony with each other, it's more efficient. He gives the example that the light bulb went on for him is they're all at the bar and they're all wanting to hit on the same girl. And all these girls walked in together, and there's one that's more beautiful and better looking than all the rest, but they're all pretty. And instead of everybody just going after the ones that are all pretty, they're all thinking, let's go for the same one. And he's like, no, this is the model. If we all go after someone else, we'll all get somebody. And isn't the goal for all of us to get somebody today? And they did that, and it worked. And it's the same for prepping. Like, you build your community. It's not practical for you to be the expert, the only expert on everything. It's completely, number one, crazy to be that guy, because if something happens to you, everybody else is gone.
Yep.
What is practical is for everybody to learn a couple things and become as expert as they can in those things. Yep. And have those things all work together for the good of your group. And then, obviously, as Justin says, learn to navigate egos. Because that's going to be a hot topic no matter what. Everybody's got an ego.
Well, it's kind of like at first when those egos start flaring, you can just sit back and wait, and just at some point they're all going to realize, we don't, because of the ego, they're the kind of person that's probably not really got the goods or the skills to back it up. So you just wait till the fire burns down, and then you're like, all right, now are you ready to actually, do what we're supposed to do and move forward? And anyways, yeah.
I'm just responding to comments here, so I'm not listening.
No, we're all like bouncing all over the comment. This is awesome. Like the whole point of this weekly live is to get all these questions out. And so you guys are asking a lot of great questions. Going back to the oil pulling, Practical Civilian just pointed out, and I forgot to mention this too, like, do not swallow the oil after you've done oil pulling. That is chock full of bacteria, and your body's going to have to work really hard to clear that out. You just don't want to be swallowing that stuff. So the other thing is when it comes to, getting the right gear and not going overboard with just buying everything all at once, take the time to learn about each thing. If you've got something that you're like, oh, do I need to get this or not? Like, maybe hop into your group and talk to your peers and see who already has one and if it makes sense or not. Maybe join our group, Emergency Prep and Self-Reliance, over on Facebook. Chat with us. We'll keep it in confidence. We'll be happy to help you out. There's so many things you can do to be better prepared, and you don't have to go crazy financially or focusing on getting a bunker to get better prepared. It's the little simple things that make the biggest difference. It's getting a 30-day pantry and then a 90-day pantry and then getting a year supply of everything, right? Working up to those things. And that they're all usable, and that you're not just buying something and leaving it all there for 20 years and hoping in 20 years it'll still be good, right? It's about first in and first out. You buy something, you use the oldest one you have of it first, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. And you, once you use one, you put it on the list to go buy more of it. If that makes any sense to you guys, it's all baby step prepping. Copyright Scott. There you go.
No, and I think going along that same lines is that, maybe you can't afford the super ultra whatever, gear item, but you can afford a good quality lesser. Well, get it and then upgrade later. And that's something that I think also goes along that same lines conceptually as what you're talking about, Scott, is that so many people are like, well, I'm not going to get anything until I can afford the big thing. Well, what if you can't? What if crap hits the fan before you actually can afford the big thing? Get something that's good quality in the meantime, and then work towards upgrading if you need to down the road. And then, of course, build skills. Building skills will give you the ability. I mean, there's so many people. There's so many analogies about how, you don't need the fancy hammer or drill bit. Like, a guy who knows what he's doing can take any hammer or drill and like nail it. Obviously, I mean, pun intended.
Screw it.
So
nail it. Just drill it.
Learn your skills, and you're gonna be fine.
Well, it's like going back to everyone's going to hunt as soon as things go sideways, and the prudent person's going to set up snares. Right? The prudent person's going to have their their oldest food storage that maybe they don't eat. Maybe they got some nuts that are starting to go bad. They're going to put those all over their back deck and see what squirrels come and start setting up snares for those.
Yep.
Right. Passive. I think there's so much to be said about passive preps, things that you don't have to actively work and expend energy on that are going to help support you, such as fruit trees, nut trees, right? Plants that are going to come back every year that you can eat. That's practical. Going and buying a year supply of freeze-dried food, not practical. Going and buying a Harvest Right freeze dryer, not practical. For the amount of money you buy one of those for, you could have 3 or 4 years worth of food storage in the practical stuff, your wheat, your rice, your beans, right?
Mm-hmm.
And have planted 20 trees.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe
Writing that down, Justin. Passive preps. I like that one.
Yeah, we'll do that.
I've been preaching passive prep since PrepperCon days.
Totally. I know it comes up regular in our episodes.
Maybe we'll do a little. Maybe I can make a PDF handout on that idea too. But yeah, it's there's so much to be said about simplification of everything and creating tools and systems that work for you, so that you're not having to work at it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one last comment, I guess, here. There's some good conversation going on about rifles, ARs, so forth. From my experience, you can buy, like Practical Civilian says here, a $400 Ruger American that is going to shoot incredibly well, in 300 Win Mag out to 1,000 yards or more for $400 plus an optic, and then plus a couple of bucks a round for that. Instead of going and spending $2,000 on a sniper rifle with a couple $2,000 scope on it, right? You're into a rifle for maybe $600 to $800 that will do 90% of what that more expensive rifle will do, right? That's being practical, with your prep. And if you have the money, great, and you can afford a Noveske, or you can go afford some high end sniper rifle, which I don't know much about because I'm not into that, but there are a lot of great guns out there for very affordable. You don't have to spend a whole lot of money. Yeah, they're not as cool looking. They've got the plastic stock. They're not a composite stock. They're maybe heavier. They're not as light as the more expensive rifles. Not as cool, but man, they'll do the job.
And there's some states where you can get those things like owner to owner. You don't have to go through a store. And so be looking for like boards where you can get guns for deals, because there's sometimes people they're looking for a quick cash because they hit on hard times, or they maybe somebody inherited a gun and they don't want it, and so they're selling it for cash. I mean, there's deal. My brother-in-law lives in California, so he can't do a lot. So he looks on the boards in Utah, and he sends me this stuff. Anyways, he's always telling me about deals he's getting for different ammo, different guns. One time he bought 3 guns for the price of about one. One of them was illegal in California, so he shipped it to me and gave it. He says, "Paris, I basically got a 3-for, and so take it. Whatever the cost of the FFL was, I just paid the cost of the FFL, and I got a handgun." So there's deals out there if you go looking.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing is like always be looking for the bargains.
They're out
but
there.
Don't just buy a bargain because it's a bargain, because it might be something you don't need.
There you go.
Right. So
that's impractical.
Make sure you guys, if you're new to the podcast or you haven't heard this before, go to preppertalkradio.com, go to the free downloads page, join the community. We've got ways that'll help you inventory and track the stuff you have. And on an upcoming episode, we'll talk about we'll talk about passive preps, some different systems you can use to help fortify and simplify your life for when things go sideways so that you don't have to. You guys have been listening to Prepper Talk Radio. We are the podcast of preparedness. We are radio for the ready-minded, and you are awesome for listening and being a participant in our journey in helping the world get better prepared. Thank you guys, and we will catch you on the next episode.
Take care, guys.
See you next week.